Biden's weakness putting the rest of the world at risk. Weakness opens the door to evil. President Biden's weakness over the past 2 years has invited many of the problems we see in the world today. For all the complaints about former President Donald Trump's tweets, I would take one now. Remember when he said this? To Iranian President Rouhani, never, ever threaten the United States again or you will suffer consequences the likes of which few throughout history have ever suffered before. We are no longer a country that will stand for your demented words of violence v. death. Be cautious. Right now, I would appreciate more of his mean tweets and decisive actions. Hamas was not successful with blatant acts of terrorism while Mr. Trump was in office, and Iran did not flaunt its financial support of the terrorist group in the past. Russian dictator Vladimir Putin did not invade Ukraine during the Trump administration. As president, Mr. Trump ordered the precision strike that took out the head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps Quds Force in 2020. A drone strike on the Baghdad airport killed top Iranian commander Qasem Soleimani. After the attack, the president said, "He was planning a very major attack and we got him. Peace through strength works." Just as they did during the Reagan administration, the capabilities of our armed forces increased under the Trump administration. Mr. Trump kept us out of war by being strong, not weak. Mr. Biden, on the other hand, is a wimp on national security. His weakness is putting the rest of the world at risk. Despite pleas from military advisors, Mr. Biden pushed forward with an arbitrary deadline for the removal of all U.S. troops from Afghanistan. Tragically, 13 U.S. service members lost their lives, as did countless allies of our government in that country. In addition, the implementation of a better plan for a drawdown would have allowed Afghan forces to maintain control of the country. Instead, the Taliban now dictate the actions of the nation. Worst of all, about $7 billion worth of military equipment was left behind and is being used to oppress the people of Afghanistan. Some of it either has been or will be used against Israel and eventually even against the United States. The failure of the withdrawal from Afghanistan revealed the weakness of the Biden administration. In turn, Mr. Putin saw an opening and moved into Ukraine. The people of that sovereign nation rejected the attacks by the Russian military, but the rest of the world saw a weak response from Mr. Biden. Then the Biden administration rewarded the oppressive leaders of Iran by announcing plans to lift economic sanctions and make $6 billion available to the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. This gave the green light for the attacks we saw against Israel this past weekend. Iran must pay for its involvement in these attacks. The people of Israel have every right to respond to these attacks on their citizens. This was their 9/11. They must restore a deterrence to actions against them. The United States must help in this effort. Support Israel's efforts to restore its Iron Dome missile defense system. Provide Israel with all the arms and intelligence it needs to eliminate the terrorists. Speak out against those siding with Hamas and the terrorists, abroad and at home. We must also push back against those supporting the terrorist acts. Freeze the $6 billion transfer payment to Iran. Renew economic sanctions. Expand the Abraham Accords. Let all governments in the region know that they must not allow their territory to be used to wage the war against Israel. Hold the leaders of Hamas accountable for their actions. Mr. Biden wasn't even briefed on what happened in Israel until Saturday morning, even though the attackers started late Friday night. Even then, he was slow in his response. We need a commander-in-chief who takes charge and understands that the United States is the leader of the free world. We need a president who will keep us out of another world war through strength, not appeasement. It is time for America to lead again. Biden's weakness putting the rest of the world at risk. Weakness opens the door to evil. President Biden's weakness over the past 2 years has invited many of the problems we see in the world today. For all the complaints about former President Donald Trump's tweets, I would take one now. Remember when he said this? To Iranian President Rouhani, never, ever threaten the United States again, or you will suffer consequences the like. No labels won't help Trump. Our polling shows that a unity ticket would pull from both parties equally. As no labels works to gain ballot access for a potential 2024 independent presidential ticket, most of the vitriol directed at us comes from the Democratic establishment, which is anxious that we'll hurt President Biden and help elect Donald Trump. But if these concerns were well-founded, I wouldn't be a part of this effort. No Labels has spent almost 2 years conducting extensive polling and modeling to understand our potential effect on the race and what our path to victory could be, including a poll late last year of more than 25,000 registered voters nationwide. It found that a moderate independent ticket would pull equally from both parties, 14% from registered Republicans, 14% from registered Democrats. This finding is backed by precedent. Ross Perot pulled equally from both parties in 1992. Of course, since No Labels would be nominating a unity ticket that could include a Republican and Democrat as running mates, much depends not only on who the candidates are, but the order in which they appear on the ticket. In July and August we tested how the partisan breakdown of the ticket would affect the race by surveying 10,000 registered voters in the top 8 presidential battleground states: Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. The poll, conducted by HarrisX, found that a unity ticket led by a Republican presidential candidate had a stronger path to victory and drew more votes from Mr. Trump than Mr. Biden in 7 states, with North Carolina the sole exception. Who will be on our ticket is still an open question, and we are currently determining the process by which that will be decided. But one thing is certain. We stand by our original pledge that we will nominate a ticket only if the American people want it and if the polling is clear that we won't be a spoiler. For now, both conditions are being met. Our polling shows that an independent ticket has a legitimate and expanding path to victory. In December, 58% of registered voters said they'd be open to voting for a moderate independent ticket if Messrs. Trump and Biden were the alternatives. By the summer that figure had grown to 63%, and some of the most significant growth occurred among a segment of voters who could be described as liking Mr. Trump's policies but not Mr. Trump. For any who are skeptical of No Labels internal polling, let's remember that poll after poll shows that 2/3 of Americans don't want a rematch of the 2020 election. A Gallup poll from October found that 63% of voters are open to a third party and that demand for an alternative is higher among Republicans than Democrats, suggesting that Mr. Trump could have more to lose from the entry of a viable third choice. Of course, no one can know exactly what effect a third ticket would have, especially if you add a fourth or fifth ticket. While our data don't indicate that No Labels would hurt Mr. Biden, it's entirely plausible that Cornel West would, since he is running as a third party from the president's left. Similarly, reports indicate that the Trump team is preparing attacks against Robert F. Kennedy Jr. after its polling found that his independent run could take votes from Mr. Trump. No Labels opponents in the political establishment